Rand Paul thought he had a gotcha. Instead, he accidentally exposed a much bigger problem: billions in border spending that Kristi Noem cannot explain. When the math collapses this fast and the answers get this vague, something is very wrong inside DHS. And this exchange makes it impossible to ignore.
We talked a little bit about the wall earlier. The administration has asked for $46.5 billion for the wall. The border on the Mexican border is about 1,950 miles. We've fenced or walled about 700 of it. That leaves about 1,200 miles. There's 200 or 300 miles of it that probably never going to have a fence on. It's mountainous or just impossible to fence or wall. So I would say realistically, you got under 1,000. But let's just say there's 1,000. You really want to wall on 1,000. CBP says it's 6.5 million per mile. Your response today was 12 million per mile. That means $12 billion for 1,000 miles. We're off here by a factor of 3 or 4 with 46 billion. Where's the rest of the 46 billion? The administration says they want 46 billion for a wall. You could pave all of it and still have, 34 billion left over. What's the 34 billion going for?
Yeah, Senator, thank you for the question. We do have 702 miles of wall today. 598 of that are steel. The rest of that is temporary, that's in place. Since the president's been in office, over 70 miles has been erected. We have 11 contracts that have gone out and allocated. We also have 5 more that are pending. Based on the dollars that have been requested, it's not just the infrastructure that would be built, that would be the actual wall construction. It would be also surveillance equipment.
The number's way off. 1,000. You could do 1,000 miles for 12 billion. You're asking for 46 billion. So I'm one who's not impressed and would have to see more detail as to where the rest of the money goes. We can't just throw $30 billion out there and say things cost a lot.
I agree. We'll get you the specifics on that.
With regard to the drones and all the preparatory work that DHS does and the government does for the NFL and for FIFA, does the NFL pay DHS for the work you do?
Boy, not to my knowledge. I will.
Well, I mean, here's my point. The NFL makes billions of dollars. We're $2 trillion in the hole. I don't care if government shares their technology and government helps out the World Cup. They ought to pay.
Yeah,
people are paying hundreds of dollars for tickets. I mean, thousands of dollars for the NFL, for Super Bowl and things. They're also paying for FIFA. And so these people ought to pay. And so I'm one holding up these authorizations, and I'll let them go forward. But I want people to pay. I mean, it's ridiculous that the average taxpayer who could never afford to go to an NFL Super Bowl has got to pay for their security. Should the government help? If we have technology they don't, perhaps. But they ought to pay. So NFL, FIFA, I think they ought to pay. And we'll be insisting on trying to put language in that. If you're a for-profit entity and the government's helping you, you ought to pay for it. With regard to TSA Quiet Skies and Tulsi Gabbard situation, I suspect there are going to be other people that were caught up in this thing as well. I'm horrified by the idea that we took a former congresswoman and we're surveilling her and riding on jets with her. There was another story of an air marshal whose wife, might have been at January 6th or something, and now we're, have air marshals following another air marshal or his wife. So I want to hear the whole story of what happened. I want to hear that people have been let go, that they're no longer doing this. If there were abuses of Tulsi Gabbard's liberties, I want to hear from that. But I want repercussions to come from this. And I think you've said something's coming. Please let us know, and let us know how the program the destruction of civil liberties can be minimized. I frankly probably have trouble with the whole program, but let's see if there's some way. But we need significant reform. If it needs legislation, please come to us with that. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Secretary Noem, for being here.
Rand Paul isn't usually the person delivering clarity in a congressional hearing, but here, his questioning exposes a fundamental truth about Kristi Noem's DHS. This is an agency throwing around billion-dollar figures with barely any public accountability, and that alone should alarm every American who cares about competent governance. Because when Paul asks, very plainly, where the rest of the $46 billion is going, Noem's answer reveals the deeper structural problem. She doesn't have one. She reiterates mileage, contract counts, and talking points. She does not offer numbers that reconcile. And in a budget request this massive, that absence isn't just sloppy, it's dangerous. What you see unfolding in real time is an administration building a national security apparatus around blind spending rather than strategic planning. They're pouring billions into the symbolism of a wall while refusing to justify the finer details of how that money is allocated. And this is exactly how bloated, unaccountable agencies grow, under the cover of security rhetoric that shuts down critical questioning. But the exchange becomes more revealing when Paul raises the issue of DHS's support for events like the Super Bowl and the World Cup. These are entities generating billions in profit, yet the American taxpayer is footing the bill for their security? That's not border safety. That's corporate favoritism disguised as national duty. And when Kristi Noem cannot articulate why these corporations don't pay for the services they consume, it highlights a fundamental ideological hypocrisy. This administration talks endlessly about fiscal responsibility, yet protects the interests of billion-dollar industries at public expense. Then Paul pivots, and the stakes become even clearer. He brings up the Quiet Skies program, where domestic surveillance appears to have crossed lines most Americans don't even know exist. Former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, allegedly monitored by federal air marshals, the spouse of an air marshal tracked for reasons that remain unexplained. These aren't the actions of a government prioritizing public safety. These are signs of mission creep, agencies expanding their power without public debate, oversight, or legal justification. And Noem's responses? No corrective plan, no assurance, just vague acknowledgments and promises of repercussions. But repercussions for whom? The violators or the whistleblowers? In an administration obsessed with secrecy and loyalty, the distinction matters. What this exchange ultimately reveals is the cost of governing by improvisation. Billions spent without coherent justification. Federal resources deployed for private industry without accountability. Surveillance programs running without clear limits. And a DHS secretary unable or unwilling to articulate guardrails that protect civil liberties. This isn't just mismanagement. It's a systemic weakening of the democratic norms that keep national security powers from becoming political weapons. And when those safeguards disappear, the gap between government authority and public protection widens dramatically. If you appreciate this clarity and want more breakdowns that cut through spin and expose the real stakes behind these hearings, make sure you like the video, subscribe,